mtaweza kubombea katika mambo yote ambayo mtakayofanya. Kwa hivyo karibuni sana na muendelee kujifunza mengi, ndio muweze kuwa viongozi wa kuaminika miaka yenu ya usoni. Asanteni sana Bwana Spika.
Senator Kajwang.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for this opportunity to contribute to the debate on a matter that is one of the most important functions of the Senate. Mr. Speaker, Article 217 of the Constitution requires the Senate, and not just Parliament, to determine the basis for allocating among the counties the share of national revenue that is annually allocated to the county level of government. Mr. Speaker, this is one of the few original functions of the Senate. You remember, even impeachment begins at the National Assembly. That is where the indictment is done and trial is done in this chamber. But when it comes to this formula, Mr. Speaker, the Constitution is very clear that it is the Senate that originates it by a resolution. And in the event the National Assembly disagrees with the Senate, the threshold has also been defined. The threshold is so high that it can only be amended by the National Assembly if 2/3 of the members of the Assembly vote in support of an amendment. Mr. Speaker, this is an extremely important exercise that is done every 5 years. If you look at comparative jurisdictions, the United Kingdom has been struggling with the concept of devolution, the sharing of resources between the center and the other entities like Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. But in their case, they came up with what is called the Barnet formula. The Barnet formula is fairly fixed. I know it has been criticized, and it has featured even when the regions are doing referendum for secession. The Barnet formula has been accused of perpetuating disparities amongst the regions. But in the UK, you do not really need a resolution of Parliament to decide how resources are shared between Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. In South Africa, Mr. Speaker, we've got the provincial equitable share formula. And Mr. Speaker, South Africa, their devolution structure is not very, very different from devolution structure. In Nigeria also, they've got a formula which has a lot of parameters that is given effect through an act of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, since we promulgated this constitution, we have had 3 formulas. But Mr. Speaker, the first formula and the second formula were largely the same. If you looked at the factors that were there, it was just tinkering with the numbers, slight tinkering with numbers. In the first formula, population was at 45%, and it was the same in the second formula. Equitable share was at 25% in the first one, it was 26% in the second one. So Kenya has not really changed the basis of allocation of revenue until the third formula. Mr. Speaker, I was in the House when we had the classic debate on the third formula for revenue allocation. And Mr. Speaker, it took almost 11 sittings of this House. Each sitting was extremely volatile, was extremely noisy, was extremely contentious, as we sought to find a middle ground to ensure that there was some equity in allocation of resources. When the plenary could not resolve the matter, and when Kamkunjis, the ones Senator Mungatana has referred to, could not resolve the matter, because as it was then, and as is now, we'd go into Kamkunjis and agree informally, but then when members came to the floor, they would play to the gallery, or they would play to the political persuasions that they subscribed to, and for 11 meetings, we could not agree on anything. Ultimately, the House resolved to set up a bipartisan committee. Mr. Speaker, I was privileged to be a member of that committee. This committee was co-chaired by Senator Moses Wetangula and the current governor of Nairobi, Governor Sakaja. Mr. Speaker, we spent a lot of time in this chamber We did almost 1 week of meetings. But ultimately, the agreement that we came up with, I can tell you, was not based on any science. It was based on this concept called holding harmless. It was based on the concept of making sure that nobody lost. And so we froze an amount and said that a certain amount would still be distributed on the basis of the second formula. And we introduced a new formula that would apply on increments from that threshold that we are defining. Mr. Speaker, in my view, the third formula was perhaps more scientific and more service-driven and more sector-driven. Because in the third formula, we brought in aspects of service delivery. We put a measure on health. And on measuring health, we were looking at picking data and seeing, how many level 4, level 3s, dispensaries that a county has. And CRA had a worksheet that had all that data. Now, the problem was some counties, in a bid to look good, had upgraded a lot of their hospitals to be level 4 in name, but there was nothing in terms of facility. As a result, Mr. Speaker, I realized that between Homa Bay County and Migori County, Migori was getting almost 200 million more on the health index because they had fewer level 4 hospitals. Homa Bay was getting less because my governor then wanted to show that he was working, so he upgraded a lot of level 4. So it looked like Homa Bay was doing better on the health index. We had certain parameters around agriculture. And Mr. Speaker, I do recall the then Senator for Nairobi brought it to our attention that agriculture is not just a rural occupation or preoccupation. And he gave us as an example that one of the main dairy producers in this country is here in Nairobi. I think there's someone who operates in Karen and produces a lot of milk, perhaps more milk than any other producer around. The third formula was elegant in the manner in which it broke down the service dimensions. The only failure was lack of accurate data to back it up. And Mr. Speaker, even the Rural Access Index was based on the number of roads in a county. But we have had a problem with classification of roads because the national government does not want to let go of roads to county governments, and so there's been some frustration in ensuring that roads are classified. If we had accurate data, Mr. Speaker, I would still insist that this country continues to use the third formula. But the proposal by the Finance Committee is a de facto endorsement of the third formula. Because in the spirit of holding harmless, the Finance Committee has told us that 387 billion would still be distributed on the basis of the old formula. And any increment above that would be subjected to a new formula. I think to some extent it is a confirmation. Now, what I am not sure about is that whether in the 387 billion, the factors or the data that was used back then will be refreshed or will just freeze the amounts as they were. If we freeze the amounts as they were, I think that would make sense, because going back to the data and tinkering with it might lead to unexpected results. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, this fourth formula that the Finance Committee proposes, 96% is a third basis, and only 4% is a fourth basis, assuming that we are going to be allocating the 405 billion that was brought to this House by the National Assembly. I want to encourage the House. Let us increase the base. That is where the solution lies. We are fighting over small fragments because we think that counties should only get 387 billion or 405 billion. Mr. Speaker, the political formation to which I belong has clear, unequivocal instructions that we must support devolution. We must give effect to devolution as captured in the Constitution. And if we are to be faithful to the Constitution, we must give resources to our county governments, and we have made it clear 450 billion Kenya shillings is a bare minimum. I know that the Senate has recommended 465 billion. If you can get 465 billion, I'll be very happy. The instructions I have, Mr. Speaker, 450 billion, nothing more. Well, something could be more, but nothing less. Because with 450 billion, the small counties, and I don't know why we want to call some counties small. Why should you call your county a small county? Simply because of the revenue. Why should you call your county small? Simply because you have a governor who does not know how to be fiscally responsible and fiscally prudent. Why should you tarnish the name of your county by calling it small? Mr. Speaker, we have seen big counties in quotes that cannot make fiscal sense or fiscal responsibility sense. We have seen small counties in quote that have been able to undertake programs that have been transformational. This obsession of now County X has done a tarmac, 10 kilometers of tarmac, and County Y cannot do tarmac. Really, if we put pressure on the national government to let go of the money that is sitting at Kera, money sitting at Kura, money sitting at the Ministry of Roads, I am sure that will be a few tens of billions that would go to counties, and it would be shared out amongst the counties. Mr. Speaker, water is a devolved function, but we still have the national government sitting with huge budgets for water. We see national government officials moving around and giving boreholes in villages, a job that should be done by the governors and the counties. Let us push for that money to go down. Mr. Speaker, housing is a function of county governments. Just this weekend, we have launched affordable housing in Homa Bay County, and I do congratulate the national government for bringing this to fruition. Of course, these houses are being built using money that is taxed, or where Kenyans are taxed, so it is not like the government is a very big genius, because the money is ring-fenced. You have to pay it, upende usipende, whether you like it or not, you must pay that money. But we must find a way of building synergies with county governments, Mr. Speaker. The synergy cannot be that the county provides the land and then the national government builds the house, and then now you have problems on who owns those houses. Let us give counties a share, proceeds from the housing levy fund, so that they can also be able to make their own decisions on where they feel they should do housing. If we did so, Mr. Speaker, we'll be bridging the gap between 387 and 450 billion. Markets. And Mr. Speaker, on this, we must call out the governors. When the president goes to regions, he comes to launch markets. And when governors climb on top of that car to speak, they're asking for markets. Build for us a market here, a market there. The question is, the 387 billion that we are sending to them, why can't they use that to do markets, so that we allow the national government to do bigger things that can stimulate economic activity in those regions? Mr. Speaker, if the money for markets was sent to county governments, we would be bridging the gap to 450 billion. We would not be having this conversation or this contention of discussing a formula that is only going to apply to 4% of the funds, because that is the situation now. 96% of 405 billion has been held harmless. This formula, which is likely to split this house, likely to split the nation, will be on 4%. We must increase the base. Agriculture, Mr. Speaker, is a devolved function. The only thing that remains at the center is policy. Senator Murango was a very able chair of the Agriculture Committee. We know that there are budgets in Nairobi that should be pushed down. And I'm very happy that those who are presiding over the Agriculture Ministry nowadays have seen the light, like, is it Saul who became Paul? That even though they brought fertilizer here for us to sniff and to touch, and I remember Senator Murango was sniffing the fertilizer, it is now that they have realized that what they were sniffing were proceeds from a donkey and mixed with sand and other things. Let us send that money to counties. We'll be bridging the gap between 387 and 450 billion. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, if we are to carry out a comprehensive review of this formula, I would suggest a few things. We need to bring in a fiscal responsibility measure. Mr. Speaker, there is too much fiscal irresponsibility, and there is no way to punish it. And for our governors, the only punishment they understand is either give them money or take away money from them. In the first two formula, The very first one, we had a 2%. In the second one, we had, again, a 2%. Mr. Speaker, how I wish we could have considered a fiscal responsibility index. Mr. Speaker, there are counties that, from where I sit as the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, there are few counties that have done fairly well. If you look at their wage bill, they are below the 30% or the 35% that is required by law. If you look at their development, they are above the 30% required. If you look at the operations, and Mr. Speaker, it is not all doom and gloom when it comes to devolution. Out of the 47 counties, I believe we could highlight 10 counties that are fiscally responsible. But at the bottom of the pile, there is serious irresponsibility. Senator Sifuna has just narrated some of the scenarios we have come across. And I've seen there's a schedule here circulating of counties that we are calling small by revenue. Isiolo is not a small county, Mr. Speaker, sir. Isiolo is supposed to be the capital of Kenya. It was designated as such under Vision 2030. Isiolo is at the center of Kenya, and that was where the center of gravity of this nation ought to be. Let us not call it small because of this allocation. And this allocation, if you are to add the on-source revenue, ideally, Isiolo should have a lot of economic activities. Let us put pressure on the state to live to the aspirations of Vision 2030 and bring services, bring facilities, bring activities to Isiolo. It will no longer be called a small county. But when you tell me that you want Isiolo to get 6 billion shillings, I will also challenge the proponents of that argument to advise me on how to hold accountable the leadership of Isiolo County. And that could have been achieved through a fiscal responsibility index. That if they are doing the bad things that they are doing in terms of employment of advisors, employment of chief officers, you find that a county has got 6 CEC members, 10 members of county assembly, but there are 36 advisors, and there are 36 chief officers. So it means that under every ministry, there are about 5 or 6 accounting officers. Mr. Speaker, that is even Nairobi, with more complex functions, does not have that kind of creep when it comes to advisors and chief officers. So if I had a 2% or 3%, where I'm saying this one will be shared by the 10 counties that are doing a good job, and then those who are pulling at the bottom will get nothing out of it, Mr. Speaker, I would have supported this formula more robustly. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we must ask ourselves about the blue economy. We have just had Madaraka Day in Homa Bay, and the theme was the blue economy. I am not sure, Chair Roba, whether when we take land at 8%, we are also looking at the concerns of people with vast water bodies. And this is not just a Homa Bay, Kisumu, Siaya, Migori, Busia thing. It also affects Turkana. It also affects Marsabit. And it affects Mombasa, it affects Kwale, Lamu, and Kilifi. Because, Mr. Speaker, the residents of Mfangano Island on Lake Victoria, where I come from, Mfangano is quite a big island, but the gap between Mfangano and the mainland is thousands and thousands of acres or hundreds of kilometers. Yet, they demand service. They want hospitals, they want markets, they want roads. Do we have a component here that can accommodate the blue economy? Mr. Speaker, thirdly, is that we should stop this glorification of poverty. And I've seen one of the respondents in the report of the Finance Committee, is that if poverty has a weight of 14%, it's 12%. It is CRA that proposed 14%. The committee has proposed 12% on poverty. Are we incentivizing poverty? What if Governor Roba, while he was governor, has improved the lives of his people, and his poverty index has moved from X to Y? In other words, his people are less poor. Why should he get less money? Should he be incentivized for pulling more people out of poverty? I don't know how we'll ever get to put that as a criteria. But otherwise, as it looks, we are glorifying poverty, we are rewarding poverty, so that the poorer you are, then the more money you should get. I think there needs to be an instrument for incentivization. Data accuracy, I spoke about that. We cannot be the leader in sub-Saharan Africa, and we are still complaining about the data that is held by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. And Mr. Speaker, I've seen in the report that KNBS confirmed and convinced the committee that their data is verifiable and accurate. And I thought that the only data we dispute in this country is IBC numbers. But when it comes to KNBS and revenue share, people even went to court over the issue of population census. Mr. Speaker, it's a very untidy thing that to date, you've got a court order nullifying the results of population in a certain region in this country. And Mr. Speaker, allow me to say this. Recently, the President talked about removal of vetting for IDs in the border counties. This is not a northeastern problem alone. Even me, Mr. Speaker, I was forced to go for vetting when I was applying for my ID. Why? Because we neighbor Uganda. So this suspicion about northern Kenya around population, it is part of that discrimination, systemic discrimination of certain parts of this country. It is not just northern Kenya. It affects us in Homa Bay, affects us in Migori, in Busia, and the counties that border Lake Victoria. Mr. Speaker, again, can we demand for more money to go to counties? Because the Constitution requires us to base it on the most recent accounts. And the most recent accounts, going by Article 2293, should be the revenue accounts for 2023-2024. The Treasury is trying to convince us to use 2021. That is unconstitutional. Mr. Speaker, if we had 450 billion, then we will not be in this situation. Could we as a House agree, even though that some of us are in broad-base, but one key point in broad-base was support for devolution. It is 450 billion Kenya shillings. That is what we signed for. We didn't sign up for broad-base for small markets here, a small stadium there, a small road there.
You've concluded? Thank you, Senator. Murango, Senator Murango.